Hi guys, Kelly here, and welcome to the 11th day of Bookmas. And today I wanted to share with you my least favorite books of the year. This is always a bit of a ranty video, so I apologize if it's too much ranting. And so most of my books in here, I do have some 1 stars, and then most of them are 2 stars. 1 and 2 stars are just below average for me, so none of these are just like meh books. All of them I had an active dislike for. So the way I wrote it down is I started with my 1 stars and went up to my 2 stars. So that's how I'm going to do it. So these aren't exactly in order. I just lumped all the 1 stars together, and then we'll get to the 2 stars. And so we're going to start off with Gimme a Kiss by Christopher Pike, which I gave 1 star. And this is a book written, I think, back in the 80s or 90s. It's a teen thriller, and I was just kind of experimenting reading books. Like, this was for a video that I did of like reading my lowest rated books that I own, and I had bought it because I used to love Christopher Pike when I was in middle school, and I just wanted to see if his books held up. They do not. This one was about this girl who writes about a sexual fantasy in her journal, and so it isn't something that actually happened. She just writes out her fantasy, but she doesn't say it's a fantasy because it's her journal. But somebody gets a hold of it and spreads it around the entire school, making it seem like it was fact, and she gets like majorly slut-shamed, and that really bothered me because the guy in the story, it was totally double standard. Everybody's like clapping him on the back and like, yeah, you got her, and all that stuff, even though he has a girlfriend and she is the only one getting like berated, even though this didn't even actually happen. Yeah, it was just really annoying to read that. It's not something that I would enjoy, and I only finished it because of that video, but it definitely did not hold up. There was also a whole thing at the end that I won't tell you about. It's because it's the big climax of the mystery that was really outdated the way it was handled as well. So yes, I would not recommend going back to Christopher Pike's book in the current time, or at least not this one, The Like View of Sex. And there was actually like even a point where she works in a dental office, and the doctor comes to her, the dentist comes to her and says, I know you're a good girl, and like starts talking about all the stuff that he heard about this journal and like how he expects better from her. And I'm like, you are an adult. You should not be talking to your teenage employee about their sexual experiences. Like, it was really inappropriate. So that was a 1 star for me. And then next I have The Red Parts by Maggie Nelson, and I was really excited to read this book. The way it's pitched, the way it says in the synopsis, is this is a memoir from Maggie Nelson about a time when her aunt had died was killed before she was born. And when she is older, when Maggie is older, some new evidence comes, like DNA becomes a thing. So this cold case is reopened, her aunt's death. And this is Maggie's experience going through the trial. You know, she's never known her aunt and only knows about her and her form of her murder. And that sounded really fascinating in terms of a memoir. But it turns out that the book only has about 20% of it is about the trial and her experiences going to this trial and hearing about her aunt's death. And the majority of the book is just like random journal entries of her just like spouting stream of consciousness, her thoughts and feelings about things in her life, and just like really did not like it. Like, I really wanted to hear about her aunt's death and about her feelings about it. And then it was just, a lot of it was babbling about an old relationship she had that was falling apart, that had fallen apart and all that stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. This is not what was pitched to me. And so I just hated it. I basically only finished it because it was very short. I feel like, I don't remember how long it was, but I feel like the audiobook was only like 3 or 4 hours long. And so I listened to it a little faster. It was just almost done by the time I was about to give up. So I just finished it, but it only got 1 star. I did not like it. My next 1 star was Why We Broke Up by Daniel Handler. And this is one that a lot of people don't like, so I'm not alone on this one. And this is a story about this couple and how they get together in their relationship and then how they break up. And basically the whole book is a breakup letter that the girl is writing to the boy after they've broken up and talking about, like, basically venting her frustrations about their relationship and their breakup. And so I understand why he wrote it the way he did, but I really hated reading it. So the whole book is just like stream of consciousness. But like I said, I know that was like a conscious choice by him, but it was not enjoyable to read. Like there were pages that were like one run-on sentence was an entire page, and it just like drove me nuts to read it. Next, we're gonna talk about my 1.5 star. And when I put this one on Goodreads, I rounded it up to 2, but the more I think about it, I might lower it back down as a 1 on Goodreads, because I have like angry thoughts about this book. And you've never heard me talk about this because I just read it like a week ago for Christmas, and it's called The Mistletoe Promised by Richard Paul Evans. And this was turned into a Hallmark movie, Christmas movie, and I had watched the movie and I enjoyed it, so I thought I would read the book. I thought it'd be a fun like Christmas read to be able to like just read a fast, cozy Christmas romance. And no, and it really like bothers me, because if you look at the like cover, you read the synopsis, you even read a lot of the reviews, everybody makes it seem to be like a cute, fluffy Christmas romance, and that's exactly what I wanted on Christmas. I read this like right before Christmas, and that is not what I got, and I was very angry. This also gets a very high rating. It's rated like a 4.16 on Goodreads, and I just don't understand how more people don't have a problem with it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not the right audience for this. But basically, the synopsis of this is that there are two, people that work in this office building, and they don't really know each other because they don't work for the same company, but they see each other at lunch sometimes. And around Christmas time, they're both alone. And so the guy is like, hey, let's make a contract or a promise that we will pretend to be dating over Christmas, that we could go to each other's like work events, or family events, and we won't be alone over the holidays. And then once it like hits Christmas Eve, we'll be done. And we can just go back to being people that only see each other at lunchtime. And that sounded like a cute concept, like in the movie, it was really adorable. And it sounds like something I would like, fake dating that turns into love, that's what I expected. But no, and it started out that way. So like the first third, I was really loving it. It was cheesy, but it was like fun cheesy. It was like totally like Hallmark movie cheesiness. And then like we know that the main woman, what's her name, Elise, has a secret, because it even says in the synopsis. But I thought I knew what the secret was, and I was fine with it. It was gonna, it gives a little conflict to the story, all that stuff. And then the secret is revealed about a third of the way through. And I was just floored, like so shocked that he would use this as a plot device. And in this kind of book, I'm not gonna say what it is because people might still want to enjoy it. Obviously, a lot of people enjoy this since it gets such high ratings, but the thing that is her secret is something that I don't think should be just thrown into a cute, sweet romance and kind of like brushed over. Like, it's that serious. It almost disgusted me that he would use this plot device in what is supposed to be such a light thing. It was like, you know how Nicholas Sparks, when you read a Nicholas Sparks book or watch a Nicholas Sparks movie, you expect like cute romance and then bam, like, some tragic thing happens. Well, this was like Nicholas Sparks times 10. Like, it was that traumatic and horrible. And I just could not believe it. And I was like, once that hit, I almost just like stopped reading the book, because I was like, this is not a cute, sweet Christmas romance. Like, this is horrible. And I only continued because I was like, well, I want to see what he does with it. Maybe he'll take it seriously. And it just got more ridiculous. And pretty soon I was just hate reading the second half of the book, because not only was that tragic thing that should not be just like made sweet, it just kept getting worse. Like, then the guy revealed some secrets, and the way that the secrets like link and all that stuff, it was just horrid. I do not understand how people love this book. I don't know if you love it, if you read this book, if you like cheesy Christmas movies and you read it, let me know why people would still like, even in the reviews, people still say it's a fluffy Christmas romance. It is not fluffy. Like, this is a horrible thing that they're taking. I know this is turning into a rant, but that's why I'm moving this down to 1 star, because it makes me so upset, the marketing of this book, and then to throw that in there is just despicable, in my opinion. Yeah, if you want to know like why I'm so upset, message me in the comments and I will tell you. I can spoil it for you if you want, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody because obviously it gets high ratings. Somebody else might want to read it, but don't go in expecting just a fluffy, cute romance. There's definitely some serious things happening. All right, done with that rant. Let's move on to my 2-star reads. And so the rest of these are all 2 stars. And first, I'm going to talk about The Spirit of the Fox by Matthew O'Connell. And you have not heard me talk about this book on my channel because I kind of forgot to review it. I read it like around September or something like that. And for some reason, I just forgot to talk about it in my recent reads because it was an ebook. And actually, let me go back and explain that I listened to this book on audio because I was helping the narrator to edit it. So I was like working on this book. And so it might not be fair, but I still like read it because I still listened to it and read it while I was editing it. But I just didn't review it because I would have DNF'd it if I was just reading it on my own and not actually like being forced to read it for work. And I just hated it. Like, I thought he did something good, and so I gave it the 2 stars, but I really didn't like a lot of it. And basically this is a thriller that is about this young woman who her parents are divorced, and her mom is Japanese and went back to Japan after they divorced, and the dad is an American. So she's Japanese American, and she goes with her dad to Japan to kind of like work for a little bit, and I don't know if she's teaching English as a second language, something like that, some kind of teaching role in Japan, and she's trying to like, you know, kindle a relationship again with her mother and like all this stuff, and something happens to her, which I don't want to spoil it, and we just kind of like see her kind of lose her memory and stuff like that, and so it seems like something weird is going on with her disappearance. Like, we still are following her, but she doesn't act like herself. Like, something happened to her in this accident. And the problem I had was, one, the thriller itself was so obvious. Like, the very first time the killer appears on the page, I knew that was gonna be the killer. And there was never, I mean, they were supposed to be some red herrings in there, but none of them really pulled me away of thinking that this is still the killer. And when the killer was finally revealed, it was like such a dull reveal that I was like, okay, if you're not gonna make it surprising who the killer is, at least make it an explosive climax. But no, it was basically just like it was like, I don't know how to describe this, like almost like Scooby-Doo, where you find like the confession basically, like, and that's how we revealed the killer. And I'm like, seriously? That's all you got? And so it was pretty obvious. And then it wasn't exactly like that. I just wanted to give an example. I didn't want to give it all away, but that's basically, we're like, find something that tells us that they're the killer instead of actually getting any kind of climactic moment. And then the thing that really made me mad, like through the whole book, and why I would have DNF'd it earlier if I wasn't like had to read this, was that when she kind of gets the accident and becomes like a different kind of person, there is like so much less shaming. She starts wearing some shorter clothing and makeup, oh, heaven forbid. And like her family sees pictures of her and like basically calls her a prostitute. And I'm like, that's your daughter and she's just wearing makeup and some short clothing. And you're saying she looks like a prostitute? Like, oh my gosh. And it was like, everybody was saying things like that. And it just felt very like slut shaming, even though they just saw pictures of her. And yeah, it was just kind of gross to me the way that like that was represented. And I know he was trying to like show that she had changed a lot, but like, yeah, it just was the wrong way to approach it in my opinion. So I didn't like it. And then the next one is In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. I actually realized just now that I have like several like thrillers on here that I didn't like. And this is Ruth Ware's first book. And I just thought this was like really boring and basic thriller. I can't even remember. I did look up the synopsis on this because I could not recall one single thing. And so it's about this woman who is going to a hen party, bachelorette party for somebody that she hasn't seen since high school. And a lot of drama comes up because, you know, there's like a connection to her ex-boyfriend with this woman and all this stuff. A boyfriend that she dated in high school, and now it's 10 years later. And what bothered me was that the like actual thriller aspect itself, like the mystery kind of thing, was just kind of boring and blah. But then like the main character we're following made such horrible decisions all the time and was like hung up on this boyfriend that she dated when she was 16 years old. And she's still, as a late 20s adult, is like obsessed about this breakup and hasn't really dated anybody since because it like affected her so much. And I'm like, you are an adult, like move on. Like this happened 10 years ago and there's all these feelings still of like, come on, people break up with their high school sweethearts. It's fine. And it was just like really annoying to be kind of like in an adult book, but have all that teenager drama. It just felt dumb, and so I just really didn't like it. I didn't think the writing was terrible, so I gave it 2 stars, but it was not enjoyable. But I have liked Ruth Ware's more current work, so I'm not giving up on her completely, but that one was bad. And then next I have Elevation by Stephen King, which is a short like novella that he wrote about this guy that just keeps losing weight. Like no matter what he does, he keeps losing weight. He could be like holding rocks on a scale and he's still losing weight. And so this is more like speculative fiction. And the thing that bothered me about this one is that the other main characters of the story is a lesbian couple that are his neighbors, and he is like constantly, the main character is constantly like saying things about them, even though he's like, oh, I'm not attracted to them, you know, they're lesbians, I'm not going to bother their thing, I'm fine with lesbians. But then he'll be like, oh, look at her legs, and like say all these internal things that I'm like, it's just weird. Like that's your neighbor, they're in a committed relationship, you do not need to be staring at that woman's legs and like, you know, objectifying her. And it like happened like so much during the book. It just really bothered me. And so yeah, 2 stars. I did not enjoy it. I didn't think that it was compelling enough to get over that element. And then next I have another thriller I didn't like, which was Are You Sleeping by Kathleen Barber. And this is about a woman who, her father died when she was younger. I don't know if she was in high school or something like that. And now she's older. She hasn't been back to her hometown since that happened. And then she gets called back for something. I can't remember why. So she has to go back to her hometown and kind of confront this death of her father and like who murdered him and all that. And so it's like finding out this cold case, and there's supposed to be a podcast on it, which I think that's why she goes back, because this woman in the podcast kind of brings it up again and is trying to solve it through the podcast, kind of like Serial. And I read this because I like podcasts and books, and so that's why I picked it up. And then it turned out the podcast was very minimal. In fact, like there wasn't like really much at all from the actual podcast. Like it was like the woman that does the podcast did like talk about her podcast, like, and there was like Reddit feeds and stuff like that about her podcast, but we don't actually see the podcast in the book. And so that was kind of annoying. And then the mystery itself was just really obvious who the killer was, and that she didn't even try to put any twists and turns and red herrings. It was more just like about the emotions and things that the secrets that the main character is going through, instead of there actually being a twist or anything to the murder. So I just found it kind of boring. I did see that they're making a movie on about this, and I think it's already on some streaming device like Apple TV or something like that that has the movie that this is coming from. But the movie looks way more interesting because the movie focuses more on the podcast and the podcast like host as the main character, and so that actually sounds much more interesting than the actual book. So if you want to look it up, it's not called Are You Sleeping, the movie. I don't remember what it was called, but I'm sure you can look it up and actually check out the movie. I haven't watched it, but it looked a lot more interesting than the book did. And then next I have Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. And I just read this one like in the last month or so, so you've heard me talk about it. And this is about a 24-hour bookstore. This guy is looking for a job. He gets a job at this bookstore, and like mysterious things are happening. He's not sure what's going on at the bookstore. So he and his friends decide to kind of investigate. And this seemed so interesting because it seemed like a secret society mixed with like this old bookstore that has like mysteries and stuff. But it was like you took that and then it was like super modern technology, a lot about Google and stuff like that, and put them together, and it just didn't work for me. And so 2 stars. I just found it kind of dull and like didn't make much sense how they did it. And then my last one is Beezus and Ramona by Beverly Cleary. And this is a beloved series from like probably when I was a child or a little bit earlier. And I thought, well, I'll just give it a try because it is like something that is recommended for kids a little bit older than my daughter that's 4. And so I thought if it's something that we like, maybe I can start reading her this, because I want to start reading her small chapter books. And so that's why I picked this one up. And I really didn't like it, and I won't be reading the story to her. I think you've probably already heard of this. You know, Ramona is kind of this young, I think she's around like 4, girl that's supposed to be really mischievous and does things that like kind of crazy antics, and her older sister Ramona, Beezus, sorry, has to like put up with it and like figure out how to like get along with her sister when she's acting crazy, like doing these weird things. And that's kind of what I expected, was like mischievousness and stuff like that. But no, instead, like Ramona just acts like a brat. Like it's not even just like cutesy, like mischief. It's like downright stuff she shouldn't be doing, like bad behavior. And the parents just kind of like write it off or be like, go to your room, Ramona. And like no discipline whatsoever. And so I'm just like, why would I want my 4-year-old or 5 or 6-year-old reading all this like bad behavior and like it being like no consequences whatsoever and all that? Like, no, that I don't want my kids like reading that. Like if there's gonna be like things like that in a book, I want the parents to actually like address it and like turn it around and get like a moral from it. But I don't want it to just be like, oh, it's just Ramona acting like that. And I'm like, no, she's doing stuff that she should not be doing. No, it's not appropriate behavior. And so yeah, I just didn't like it. I don't think it held up. I think maybe like that was the way you disciplined back then, and just send kids to their room and never talk about it and about what their behavior is, but that's not the way parenting is now. So I just don't think it held up well. And so there we go. Those are my 10 books that were my least favorite books of the year. I like to say least favorite instead of worst, because some of these people would still, other people would still enjoy. And so I don't think like the worst books are the most poorly written. I just personally had problems with them and didn't like them, but you might enjoy them. If you also didn't like these books and want to talk about it down below, I'd love to hear what your feelings are, or what was your least favorite book of the year. It's always kind of fun to like talk about the thing that you hated the most and have a little rant time. And so if you like talk to me down below, I'd love to hear from you. Bye.